This story happened more than 400 years before the current history of the Blade. Richie's life began as the youngest of two twin brothers born in the house of the Lord. Since twins were born, they had to choose who would become the heir of the house, but for their father everything was easier because the youngest child, Ulrich, was born with a rather alarming mole on his forehead, so the older child's father made Abal the successor of the family while Ulrich was sentenced to death. But by this decision Matthew Ritchie fell into an inexorable rage and did not allow the child to be killed, so they came to a compromise that I speech will live, but at the age of 10 will be sent to the temple where he dedicated would his life to God. As a result, despite the fact that Yuri, whose name is Chick, were identical twins, they lived an almost completely separate life, starting with their rooms, clothes, education, and even in the food they ate. Swords Katsu was a special child, while his youngest, his brother, was always belittled by Yuri and spent most of his time with his mother. It was incredibly difficult for him to read from birth. He never smiled, moreover, he never said, and so his mother, being a religious person, prayed to the sun god that he would direct a soft light on his apparently bunny ears. She even made enchanted earrings for him. Yes, the ones that Tangier still carries with him. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. In fact, Matthew was not the only one who worried about him, since his Mechi Katsu's older brother would often sneak into his tiny room to play with him, which was actually quite risky, because if he was caught doing this or that, he would give some toy to Ulrich and his father a tough one would beat him. So Katsu's swords worked, gave his image what he made with his own hands, a small wooden pipe. One day when Katsu's swords practiced his fencing skills in the family garden, 7-year-old Ulrich, and standing under the shade of a pine tree, utters his first words. He asked his brother if he was ready to become the strongest samurai in the country. Now Michiko, the one who all his life, who believed that his brother was deaf from shock, dropped his wooden sword and stopped breathing from surprise. Despite the intention of their parents to make him a priest, Uriken declared his desire to become a samurai, and with respect for his brother's dream proclaimed his dream with the second greatest samurai in the country, and at the same time smiled for the first time. After that, Uriken continued to watch his brother's training with the intention of learning, and his father's subordinates gave Uriken a training sword for entertainment, despite the fact that he gave him simple instructions because how to hold a sword and what there must be a stance. He encouraged the boy to try to hit him when he himself took a fighting stance. In the blink of an eye, Uriken with quick blows to the neck, chest, stomach and leg defeated the adult swordsman. He not only threw him into the air but also knocked him out. Despite all this inspiring spectacle, from that moment on, Yurichev no longer talked about his dream of becoming a samurai, as he said that it was unbearable for him to beat a man. Since Swords Katsu witnessed all this, he was endlessly curious to find out the secret of his younger brother's strength, and in response Yurik said a strange thing: your opponent's lungs increase before he attacks. You just need to carefully watch the movement of his bones, muscle contraction and blood circulation. He did not immediately understand the meaning of his words, but apparently Yurik was born not only with a special mark, but not with ordinary vision and incredible physical data. Both attributes are something that even most pillars cannot master in their entire lives, but if they can do it at all. But how? As I said, the art of swordsmanship was no longer interested in, and Richie got to such an extent that whenever Katsu Swords brought up this topic, he was as disinterested as possible and preferred to play board games there and the like. But even despite this, the positions of the two brothers became opposite, because that their father received news from his subordinate about Sila and Richie, and now he will become the heir of Omichi. Katsu will be sent to the temple, but one night somewhere between 3 and 5 in the morning, Yurik visits his brother, who was now in his tiny room, and tells the news of their mother's death. He also tells he told his brother about his departure to the temple, and that before leaving he wanted to say goodbye. At the same time, he told his brother that despite their distance he would never lose heart and would work hard every day, all the time looking at the flute as if it was the most valuable treasure in the world. Yurik and he bowed deeply to his beloved brother and left without taking almost anything with him. After that, Sword Katsu found out that Yurikyu left so that his brother would not lose his dream of becoming a priest instead of him, but also the true reason why he clung to his mother for so long was that due to illness she had problems with her left side of the body, and so he actually held her all this time after leaving. And Richie started running with all his might, admiring the beauty of the sky and running day and night without a single rest. But when he reached, he met A girl who was standing motionless from the basket in her hands. Her whole family died due to the epidemic, leaving her all alone, and in order to somehow distract herself, she came to catch tadpoles and take them home. But she remained standing, unable to move, and when the sun began to set, she released all the tadpoles and her bucket, feeling remorse for separating Gif from their families. Yurik, and seeing the sadness of this girl whose eyes resembled obsidian, decided to live with her. Her name was Yutu, and she could talk from sunrise to sunset. It was thanks to conversations with her that Yurik realized that other people did not see a transparent world like him, allowing him to then understand why he felt for so long. 10 years later they got married and were expecting a child in the coming days. Because of this, Yurik intended to find a girl before sunrise who would help them with childbirth. But on the way he met an old man who, despite a sick heart, hurried to his wounded son Yurik, and being a kind soul helped this man and brought him to his son. Postponed the girl's train the next day and returned home, but night came, and when he returned home he saw the corpse of his wife and the newborn child. Spent 10 days hugging the body of his wife and child, but the demon hunter told him to arrange a repeat to honor, and in his soul this hunter was actually the ancestor of the Pillars of Flame like Ringoku. You see, Rich's dream at that time was to live a quiet life with his family. He liked this little house that they slept with each other so that he could see their beautiful faces. But even this little dream did not come true because of the demons who she did not care about the consequences of his curses and shouted his name out of pain. But she died for a while, freed herself from the curse of Mudang because of his serious condition Yurik, and asked her to help him in defeating him, to which she agreed, and this is a battle in which she is still fighting because this demon girl was none other than Tomoyo. Later that day, hunters inform Yurik and that his beloved brother Swords Katsu became a demon, that we eventually could not kill Mozo and let my brother leave there. His brother became a demon, and because of this the organization, the hunters, decided to expel Yuri. Then his former comrades were so angry that they even suggested that he kill himself, as other hunters would have done if their students or relatives had become a demon of their own choice. However, the leader of the organization, which at that time was only a designated 6-year-old child, did not allow this to happen, and therefore Yurik simply left the organization for the rest of his life, and being a Musin, he actively avoided him, fearing for his life. So Richie decided to visit a friend whom I haven't seen for almost 2 years. This friend was able to and the ancestor of Tangier and in the language of Yurik, and was very glad to see that 7 have died and everything is fine, because in the form of happiness of others made him very happy. After he told the story of his life to Yurik and expressed his belief that the power was a blessing bestowed upon him in order to put an end to the terror of Mozono, but it wasn't enough and he failed. Because of his failure, a lot of people continue to die and it hurts him, and more than anything else managed not to. He knew what to say. His 2-year-old daughter Itza had to cling to Yurik's clothes and asked for hugs. Yurik and picked up the little child at the request of you, and at the sight of the child's pure smiles and laughter, tears started rolling down his cheek under the rays of the sun. Sami Yoshitsun's wife returned home hugging the baby. He continued to cry. It is possible that he was thinking about his dream to be with his family. After seeing this, Suyoku comforted him and offered him to eat that afternoon. At Suyoku's request, he demonstrates all 13 or breathing for the family sushi and looked at it carefully, and I remembered the breath of the sun was so incredible that I would be able to spite. Forgot how to breathe with a blade. Yurik, you looked more like a spirit than a person. After that you put and invited Yurik and ever again to visit them, but before he left, Yurik and gave his earrings from dye and made it clear that he would never returned. When her Richie was leaving, he looked very sad because of what you were fussing, and tears welled up in his eyes, but he also shouted that since he saved their lives in the past, they would continue his legacy. You don't live in vain. Don't even think that you didn't achieve something there. I won't let to say this to anyone about you. I will pass these Sergius and the breath of the sun to the next generation. I promise. This idea evoked a smile from Yurik that resembled the sunrise when he said thank you. Despite his mark, Richie lived a long life, because at the age of 80 on the night of the red moon, Yurik with a mark on his face stood in front of his brother Swords Katsu, who now he was known as like a bruise, the strongest demon of all existing except for the fashion for one, the highest moon. Confused, Swords Katsu asked his brother how he single-handedly overcame the price of the mark, but that was out of the question. Answered instead, he began to cry and in a hoarse voice expressed his pity for his beloved brother who had never seen such manifestations of emotions from his brother as mistakes stood there silence, but the next moment a feeling Hurricane disappeared and he took a fighting stance. The air became heavy from the aura alone. Hurricane, despite his age, there were absolutely no flaws in his stance, and right before he moved he warned his brother about his approach, and before he could reach his sword like a bruise, Hurricane already 1 second his neck with the same strength and speed as in the dawn of his powers, now as if he was sure that in the next blow Yurik would cut him off with them. But this second blow did not follow because Rich's life had already reached its end. A wave of emotion swept over him like a bruise, because if Richie's life would be at least one becoming longer, he was died with him completely blinded by Kokoshiba's rage. He cuts the already dead body of his brother, but also cut in half a wooden pipe capable of playing only one note, of which he once made for his younger brother. This pipe remained with Yurik for decades. Even though his brother dropped his humanity, this realization made the demon above and the moon cry. He was completely defeated by Yurik and was ending with a man with incredible strength, but in the end lost those he loved the most anyway. As he once said, Sunit, his efforts were not in vain, because even today his action still helps hunters in their fight against demons. It was the story of her speech, Jack, about her. I hope you liked this video, and if so, I'm waiting for your feedback. I saw a like or comments, and